On today's SKE video, we're discussing cookbooks. Cookbooks can be a great source of information for anyone who is trying a new hobby or just trying to better equip themselves in the kitchen for more complex recipes. Cookbooks can be one of the best sources of information for you, or they can be an extreme headache. Well, today's video topic, we're going to discuss when and how to use your cookbook properly so we can advance your knowledge in the kitchen. First, let's talk about the different types of specific cookbooks. For example, this cookbook is Sourdough by Science. So a cookbook that is a singular topic is usually going to have like the history. Sometimes it talks about the health benefits. This cookbook will also usually give you a base recipe. And then from there, it'll have a whole other section on using that base ingredient, such as sourdough, to make all sorts of other recipes. Then you have in this cookbook an extra section. So like in this cookbook, for example, sourdough has discard when you feed it. So it goes into how to use the discard so you're not actually throwing it away. The next type of cookbooks we have, these types of cookbooks. These types of cookbooks are more selected era recipes. So like, for example, he has a lot of recipes in here in pertaining to different eras. So 1940s, 1950s, some of the older recipes that have long been forgotten. This is another type of cookbook. But it doesn't give you a lot of recipes for different things. Next, we come to cookbooks like this. These cookbooks are a great example of meal prep selection. For example, in the table of contents, it breaks down the different recipes. It talks about the care of some of your kitchen equipment, such as cast iron. It also talks about the different types of meal planning. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, desserts, appetizers, and sometimes even drinks. For example, this cookbook talks about coffee preparation out in the chuck wagon. Aside from these types of cookbooks, you're also going to have cookbooks like this. So these cookbooks, and it's a series, are the seasons of Good Eats. So this is basically laid out from the TV show to show the recipes so you can follow along with the TV program if you want, or for something you wanted to try that you may have watched. The other type of cookbook you're going to run into is your fan fiction cookbooks. So these are, as you can see, cookbooks that are going to be harder. And by that, I mean like this one, for example, has references to food from a very specific country, from Europe. And if you don't know the terminology of some stuff, you're not going to be able to find your ingredients because you have to kind of translate what the ingredients mean. Same with this one. These are very European cookbooks. The other issue that you're going to run into with some of these cookbooks, a little more difficult, because you're going to need some basic knowledge to be able to actually work with these recipes. Now, why am I talking about all these different cookbooks? You may never use them, you may never see them, you might have a totally different pile of cookbooks. We're going to talk about how to properly use a cookbook so you're able to get the correct information to prepare a recipe. When you understand how to use a cookbook properly, you then begin to understand how to apply that knowledge to other types of recipes. So doesn't matter which cookbook you pick up, you're going to be able to conquer that recipe with high amount of confidence, turning into a better result. Now let's get down into how to actually use your cookbook. So this is a cookbook, 1950s. When you open it up, it has usually some information on the front cover. But the most important thing is, when you first open one of these cookbooks, such as this one, it's going to explain how do you go through a recipe. Usually what follows is how to properly measure out ingredients, everything from wet, such as water, maybe pudding, sour cream, to things like chopped nuts, diced vegetables, and flour. You'll also notice it'll talk about meaning of terms, so it gives you an explanation of vocabulary words. It might talk about herbs, and then usually you have a vocabulary section. Why am I showing it from the 1950s? Well, because this cookbook from 2005 has not changed at all. So you still have, when you open it up, it actually has yields and equivalents. So it talks about how if you need bananas, you got 1 cup sliced, 1 cup mashed, how much you'll need. You come over to here and it talks about the same thing. Measuring, knives. But the one thing about newer cookbooks that you're gonna notice a lot with is sometimes they talk about electrical appliances, like the advancement of tools such as the hand mixer. It'll talk about bread machines, and with the newer invention of canned goods. And it'll also get into more advancements in ingredients, such as oranges, which for a long time were not readily available, and bananas. Learning cookbooks such as this are awesome. They make great gifts for someone who's learning to cook. They make great wedding presents for couples. They also make great informational guides for when you're trying viral recipes. Cookbooks come with a wealth of information, are broken down quite simply with learning cookbooks. And honestly, if I had to go the rest of my life with only having one cookbook, I would use one of these. So to wrap up this video on cookbooks, on another edition of Simple Kitchen Explanations, I just want to leave you with these final thoughts. Cookbooks are here to help you learn and give you access to diets and ideas that you might not have otherwise considered. Yes, the internet exists, but a lot of the older recipes are disappearing, and it's kind of sad because a lot of the handwritten recipes take a lot into consideration. A lot of its availability on ingredients, so you can do a simpler chocolate cake. But cookbooks are such a wealth of knowledge and a good source of information, not just for like recipe and food, but also safety measures in the kitchen, like how to properly hold a knife. Some cookbooks I've seen even talk about like what is some of the foodborne illnesses that are in it and what type of temperature a food is done at. Not because it's being chubby and pushy on that topic, but they just want you to stay safe in the kitchen. And some of them even talk about proper hand washing techniques and proper storage of leftovers and proper cleaning techniques. But cookbooks are not something to be feared. Cookbooks are such a fun thing to do. Even like there's cookbooks on just cookie recipes. And sometimes you just want to take the time and the effort to learn to make something new. And cookbooks are an awesome place to start. I hope you enjoyed today's SKE topic on cookbooks, and I hope to see you again in the kitchen.